Welcome, everybody that might be watching this for the first time because we're doing this for the first time. My name is Brian Fretwell, and this is going to be a live call-in podcast. We're calling it Clarify Your Value. It's based on the idea of finding blueberries that I will share here in a moment. But the idea behind this podcast is based on the understanding that we as humans have historically created clarity of our strengths, of our value, of our purpose, is through sharing stories. We've done this historically by sitting around the campfire. That who you are, what you do, what you bring to the pack came out not by just getting really good at telling your story, but in the frequency of telling your story because people were asking you about that story. For instance, if based on the idea of finding blueberries, if we were all in the same pack and you went out and found a bunch of blueberries today, the pack is going to ask you, all the members of the pack are going to ask you things like, where did you find it? How did you find it? What strengths did you use to find it? How did you not get killed by the bear when you found it? And that interaction helps you clarify that story, the frequency of those questions, and it also lets your brain know that the pack sees your value. We call that process connection. It's the science behind everything we do in Finding Good and Finding Blueberries, either on the app or even with the connector type assessment. What we're doing today and in these live podcasts is helping someone find clarity, or multiple someones based on how much time and how we engage through this science and art of asking questions. So while you may have seen podcasts where they interview experts on what they did, this is not that podcast. Or you've seen podcasts where a coach will try to solve somebody's problem for them. This is also not that podcast. My job as host and the person guiding you in these conversations is to use those questions and to avoid what we call SOFA, 1,000 points for anybody that knows SOFA. So SOFA stands for suggestions, opinion, feedback, or advice. Angela, I saw you getting ready to hit the button. There should be, like, maybe we'll do this in the future. You'll be able to punch in and win points and stuff. I'm all for gamifying it. But the idea is whatever you're seeking clarity on, whether it's what do I want to do for the future of my job? What am I good at? How do I get over this challenge? The lion's share of the clarity or the answer or the direction that you're looking for is found in where you've done it before. And to dive into that a little deeper, I firmly believe in 5+ years of doing this, that so much of our work as coaches, as leaders, as counselors, as friends, as parents, as partners, is made exceptionally harder when we don't start with connection. That we have a tendency to give advice, that we have a tendency to share our story, that we have a tendency to solve problems for someone before we've found clarity in their story. And the people that lose in that aren't just the person sharing the story or the person with the problem, it's us. Because when we help somebody else clarify their story to find how they've overcome challenges, how they've reached goals, how they've done amazing things, we in turn are inspired, we in turn learn, we in turn are made better. In fact, we need story like we need food and water because we need connection like food and water. So what we're going to do today is share some stories. Yeah. And I like to start, as anybody knows, I'm a bit of a storyteller on Instagram, right? Or other places. And I didn't really prepare a story for today, interestingly enough, but I was, however, reading, I try to every couple of years read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And I was reading it this morning, specifically thinking about this podcast, because first of all, that book is the book I have read more than any other book. A lot of the theory behind logos therapy is found in this connection research. And one of the things that he outlined years ago, but that I read this morning rather, was this idea of purpose, and that we are conditioned to seek our purpose, right? How do I go find my purpose? And what he talked about as it relates to purpose isn't something you're supposed to find. It isn't something you create. It is something that is there. That you just being here creates necessity. You have something to learn here. You have something to provide here. That your very existence here is the purpose. And I horribly paraphrased that, but I think that as I read that this morning, and I read it 2 or 3 times, what he was talking about in there, at least my interpretation of what he's talking about there, is rooted in what we're doing here. It's the idea that your story, and that's whoever may be listening to this and whoever is on this, your story inherently has value. That your experiences, your strengths, the thing you do can benefit someone else. And that in there, it's that realizing that, it's that actually stepping into that idea. It's not just where we find connection, but that is where purpose lies. That someone needs the experience you've been through, that someone needs the understanding that you've learned, that even your traumatic and horrible situations that you've been through have value for someone else. That doesn't mean those situations are great or that we wouldn't get rid of them if we could. It just means that you don't have to look for a purpose. You have to look for a place to apply it. Very much recommend Frankel's book. It's inspiring for nerds like me, very well written and documented, but the idea of finding purpose, I think, is rooted in connection. And connection is just this basic idea that together, the more we're able to see the value in each other's story, the better we're able to survive, the more likely we are to achieve goals, and the more we get a lot of other neurological, biological, and psychological benefits, of which I'll talk about at the end based on where we go in the conversation. But that's all the intro we're going to do, because it's not about me or even the science or all of this. It's about the questions and who wants to be the first person. So the idea is that if you have something you're seeking clarity on, you don't have to have much except for, hey, maybe I'm getting a new job, or I'm trying to figure out how to tell people about what I do, or I'm trying to, whatever the case might be, that's all you need. And what we'll do is I'll just start asking you questions using our Finding Good model. We'll talk about that at the end, but just to briefly outline it, the simplicity of the idea of finding blueberries is I'm going to find the thing that I'm interested in your story, which sounds really selfish, but as we'll see, that's the thing that brings clarity. We'll talk about that why later. But with all that, Jordan, right there, go ahead.
Pretty scary, man. It's being honest with myself, that's where the fear is.
Yeah.
It's time.
I want to say thank you and everybody, round of applause for Jordan, the first one, right? Yeah, nice. Yeah. So go ahead. Sorry.
It's time to move on from my position. I don't know when or how that's going to happen. It's been a lot of years that I've been in a position of being able to provide value in a coaching circumstance, and it's not been clear and evident to me that it's time to do it until now. I've started a few times and it's never been the path that's been obvious and ready for me to step forward into. The challenge is that my work I enjoy. I like working for the guy that I work for. He's the owner. But there's another gentleman in the organization that has, what's the term, legacy impact. So he's not going to leave the business. And him and I just do not see things the same way. I'm here to be a leader in example and direct confrontation for things that are opposing that. His approach is the opposite of that, unfortunately.
And just to let you know, and just to set the stage for anybody else going in the future, that I'll probably say every time on this, in these conversations, I may interrupt you, and I want to apologize in advance. But what I'm going to do is try to get into the clarity thing, right? And again, as I said before, I'm going to be a little selfish with some of the questions. The first thing I'm curious about is, where are you looking for clarity? Is it, I'm trying to decide if I want to be a coach, if I want to step out, what is it that you're looking for the most clarity on?
When and how. It's not if. I took this position. Every position that I've taken in my money seeking career has come with the caveat to myself, the promise to myself that when money was the only goal, that I would find a way to move on. That I'm not here for cash only. If there's other value that I can provide or that I can glean. As long as it's a positive circumstance, then I'll hang around and I'll move things forward.
And you're going to, so when and how to become a coach? Is that what I heard the other, is you're going to jump out into coaching?
Yeah, when and how. I've
Yeah.
been doing it for a long time in an informal fashion. Um, and situations have changed now to where I have more than anything, the confidence. I don't have the financial backing. I don't have the everything prepared, but I know that's where my
So
value in this world
yeah,
is.
so that's where I want to dive into then, if it's okay. What I'd like to know is, so it sounds like you've done coaching before, right? This isn't your first rodeo, as it were. Can you tell me, of like all the coaching you've done, if you had to pick the one moment or the one client, the one engagement that strikes you as, here is where I like really killed it as a coach, like when I did like your best coaching engagement, which one jumps up for you?
There's a few, but most have been centered around work. And as of
Mhm.
late, it's been with young men who are unclear on where they are going. A few years
So,
ago, I had a project.
yeah.
Yeah, there's two guys that I've helped in particular. One is still with me on my team. The other one had moved on to the client. In fact, we were working at a project here in Boise, and this young guy had started working for me. And within a month, it was obvious he could do more. There was no real um, reason as to what was going on. And it's a bunch of guys working every day, physical labor, and I'm the leader. And it was obvious. He was one of the guys that was like, "What's going on? Where are you? Why aren't? What's the deal?"
Let me stop you there. Like you said, he could do more. How did you know that?
He had done it.
Yeah.
We had
And
been on this
yeah, more what?
more attention, more dedication, application, focus, more authenticity and integrity for himself.
Mm,
It was obvious he was out of integrity for himself.
mm. So he had been operating at a higher level and you noticed a change.
Yeah, short term though. We had been
Hmm.
working on the project for about a month, maybe a little less. And to begin with, it was like, his name's Ben, and we can do this.
Hmm.
And as things started to move forward, being a leader in my position, I need to stay in touch with everybody, what they're doing every day, essentially, with what projects are going on, what teams are working on what. And through this month, I'd noticed he has some capabilities, he has some motivation. And then eventually it got to the point where his mind just was not there. It was a mostly
Hmm.
physical position, yet I don't hire guys who can't think. I don't
Hmm.
bring people like that on my team because they become a detriment. They're B players and turn into C players if they're going the wrong way. It was obvious that there was some coaching that was needed. So I took him aside. I think it was in the right after lunch, before lunch, and I said, "Hey, this is obvious that this is going on. Tell me about what is happening in your life." And
Hmm.
it was a pretty heartbreaking situation. Without going into too much detail, he was on the precipice of his kids not being in his life anymore because of their mom.
So there's two things I want to ask you about here, because I'm still curious. Like you said, he was operating. How did you know what signs to look for to see that he was getting out of?
Yeah, physical presence, his energy was just not there.
So
He
those are the
was
ones that,
just not
yes.
engaged.
Yeah, so those are the signs you saw. How did you know to look for those signs?
How did I know? Huh.
Hmm.
I'm an empathetic person. I have been since I was a kid. So a lot of that was natural for me. And that's my job. I've trained that for a long time as a coach, playing baseball growing up. We're a team. We have 12 guys, 15 guys on a team. And if you're not working as a unit, especially when you're on the field, you just don't succeed. And so being in tune and knowing what that is crucial in team atmospheres, especially when it's dangerous circumstances physically. So
What were the ways that you tested that? So you said you brought empathy to this. Were you asking him questions like, because it sounded like
um,
you got really clear on, oh, here's the sort of drop. And like, how did you gauge that to see that he went from here to here?
how did I engage it? It was not a, an instant thing for me
Hmm.
because I observed it over a few days. It was observation in being in a work circumstance with my teams and then choosing who is not optimal and who is not living up to their previous, almost immediate previous potential.
So it sounds like you had, and maybe it was just in your head, but you had a bit like of a checkoff list that you were going through.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's every day is, are these guys engaged? Are people paying attention? Are they asking questions? Are they working together on teams? Are there problems being raised? Because when there's a team that one person has a problem and the other three people don't come to me, then it's a concern.
So I want to ask you a quick side question. Do you have that list written down anywhere?
Not really. It's just a natural thing for me that I've always done through the process of, are they performing? Are they in tune? What's next? And if it comes down to the basics of it's obvious that they're not engaged, then there's questions that pop up for me, like what's going on at home? What's going on at work if we're not in a work circumstance? What's going on? So you start asking questions and that's exactly what I did with him. So I took him aside and we were probably 45 minutes.
I'm gonna slow you down and pull the reins a little bit, right? That because I hear so you have this checkoff list in your head. He meets the criteria of the checkoff list. How do you know when and how to, like, because it sounds like this is a touchy conversation to walk into, yeah?
Yes.
Like, what is it that you rely on to tell you when it's the right time or not the right time? Like, how did you know that?
Great question. Probably the consistency of that, of him not showing up in integrity for work over a few days.
So is that part of the checkoff list?
For me, yeah, this, if it's a one-time thing, then it's an aberration. It can be a bad day. It could be, we had a fight with the wife last night or whatever.
So there was a clear delineation of the problem, but from identifying that to knowing when and how to ask it.
Oh man, that is a really tough one, especially if I hadn't had a lot of experience with this. Do you want me to give some backstory on why I have this?
Not yet.
Okay. So it's got to be consistent and it's got to be something that is not in alignment with their previous words and actions.
Yeah. So how are you making it safe enough for this person to engage this conversation?
Yeah, great question. Again, that is a daily repetition of me being here to answer and support their questions and problems. In a work circumstance specifically, if I hadn't earned that right for them to have a leader saying, this is what we're doing, here's the vision, this is where we're going, I wouldn't have had the opportunity, let alone the right from my perspective to ask him about his personal circumstances and how that could be interrupting his work with me.
So there's earning the right, but I heard you say I wouldn't have had the opportunity. What was what opportunity arose that?
The opportunity for him to be vulnerable with me, because I had been vulnerable with these guys.
Yeah. So what was that opportunity? Was it he was just there and you engaged it? Was there something he said that now I'm going to ask him? Or was there just a time? Or was it just you saying, okay, this has happened enough?
This has happened enough. We're going to take some time.
Yeah. Now, was that like pulling him out of the work? Yeah. Was it doing it during a break? Oh, okay. So there was an immediacy to it.
It wasn't immediate to where they're in the middle of a project and going, hey, Ben, come see me right now. I've done that before. But this was, we just got done with lunch or something like that. It was at the beginning or the end of a break or something. And hey, we need to talk for just a minute. When we're done with lunch, just hang out and we need to discuss something. So it was a request from him to take time out of his work day. And he knew there was something that we needed to discuss that was important, or else I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah. So now I want to know how you learned to do that.
Oh, goodness. It had been modeled for me in my coaching and my life a lot. Making an example out of somebody in public is generally going to be a massive mistake because it creates resentment immediately with the person who does that. And so I've had that done to me, and I've had it not done to me in the past, where I've had coaches in athletics growing up for the most part, but a lot of other coaching as well. I've had people take me aside and say, hey, it was not appropriate to discuss this in the team atmosphere, but what's going on? So
there's a bit of a feeling in that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh man, it was safe.
Felt like the right,
It was safe for me. Because I'd been in both. I wasn't safe in a team atmosphere when I've been called out, and I was not the coach or leader had not earned in my right from me the opportunity to challenge me.
So,
Because that's what it was in a challenge, in an
yeah.
external, a group setting. In a
So
personal
if you,
circumstance, it is a challenge still, but it's not an abrupt, you're doing something wrong and these other people know about it.
yeah. So because you said it was safe, can you give me two different like objective criteria that allowed you to know it was safe?
That it was safe.
Yeah. Was there something he was
Objective
doing? Was it about,
criteria.
yeah, because it sounded like there was a timing element to it. There was
Mhm.
an urgency to it, maybe a way you approached it. Because you said very confidently that it was safe.
It was
What
safe for
what
him.
two things told you it was safe for him?
It was safe for him. He had bought in previously. So there was a safe circumstance
Mm-hmm.
for him to perform up to his potential and what he said he could do previous to this uh,
Yeah. So
reduction
there
in
was a bit of
performance.
knowing the story. So I could anchor it on the like
Yeah, that he
you'd
had already
earn the
performed.
right. Yeah. So this sort of ties back to like you earn the right to have this conversation. What's the
Mhm.
other piece? What was the other piece?
Him and I connect with each of my guys before
Mhm.
individually. So I hired this guy directly, and I hired most of the guys on this project. And there was only a few things that I had asked of them when I hired them. And one of them, it's real simple: communicate, show up on time, and work hard while you're at work. If we can
Mhm.
do those three things, we're going to have a great working relationship. And he had committed those things to me when we had our initial conversation. And I had committed to him that he would have a few things from me as well. One of those being his support, or my support of him
Yeah.
getting his job done correctly.
So is it fair to say that because of that, you were approaching him with curiosity?
Oh yeah, 100%, man. There's no way that if I go in with accusatory tones that he's going to be receptive.
And
So
is
I was
that
curious. So
curiosity
what's going on?
what makes is that curiosity what makes the safety?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Because I'm there to discover something and help find a solution that he needs, not a solution to a problem that I have that he is
Hmm.
becoming a part of, that's after his personal concerns.
So you have this conversation, you do some coaching with them. What changed?
For him, oh, he said very specifically in his military, he's like 22, 23, 4 years old, somewhere
Hmm.
in there, two young kids. He had said he had never in his life been taken aside and had somebody ask what's going on personally. I don't care about work. I couldn't care less about work at this time. That's obviously not the problem. And
Hmm.
in all of his training and lifetime of this understanding of how people interact, he had never been shown empathy, is really, to me, the bottom line. You're not performing up to your potential. There's something that's a disconnect. Hey, what's going on, man? There's something that's obvious to me personally that you are not in a happy circumstance somewhere outside of this. If you
Hmm.
were, this would not be happening.
And it
What's
sounds
going on?
like, yeah, so I want to ask this two ways. I want to ask it for you, but also for him. And I maybe start with you because you said earlier, like, where did this come from? And so what I've heard is this theme of like empathy. So I'm going to assume that like you benefited from someone else's empathy before. Can you tell me about that? And you don't have to tell me the situation, but like, how did you benefit from the empathy?
Connection was probably number one, that I was not alone in the circumstance, that the person who was showing the empathy understood that I was in a challenging position.
What did that allow you to do that you couldn't do before, or that you were struggling to do before you had that interaction?
Set aside my concerns and focus on the task at hand.
Mm.
I felt cared for. I felt like somebody actually gave a shit, excuse me for swearing, actually gave a shit about my performance outside of work, and that they are
What
related.
what may have so it allowed you to focus? What may have it prevented from happening?
it may have prevented a run-in between leadership and myself, a leader in the organization or team, and myself, because I've been modeled leadership since I was born, and I'm very lucky. Yet that modeling came with a lot of caveats, and so when I started to understand that those caveats are not new, I'm not the only one going through this stuff, that somebody actually cared, that I was able to say those things are separate from our work now, and we have a job to do. And not only do we have a job to do, you're on my team. You're on my team to the point where if you're not on my team dedicated, I'm in danger. And so me caring about you as a person will ultimately result in my safety.
So with the person we were talking about, your kind of coaching client as you were, what did he get more of? Because
he got filled up with knowing that he's not alone. The same thing that I experienced, the knowledge that somebody actually cared beyond a dollar.
And how did that change his behavior? What was he able to do more of?
To enact his will on himself, which means he was able to separate his personal concerns that were not appropriate to be concerned with at that time and be on the team. He was able to set aside his personal stuff and become part of the team again.
And that prevented what from potentially happening?
Prevented him from getting fired. Disciplinary action. And it would have been another conversation the next day and the next day if that were required. And since then, I've done this a few times, and it's the path of action is the same. Hey, man, you're on our team. What's going on? Is everything okay? Both ways.
This is a point where I start smiling and lighting up, and I think some others in the crowd are doing the same, because this is where I'm going to pull you all the way back to where you first, like, the thing you were looking for clarity on. And the reason I'm smiling is I'm trying to not come up with a bunch of answers for you right now, because just in listening to your story, as I see with Anjali and some others, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we want to give you advice on your coaching about right now based on what we heard. But what I want to do is circle back to when you said, I'm trying to figure out when and where to make the jump. What are the things that you need to figure out to make that? Because it sounded like there was some financial, like, how would you know it's time to do that?
That's what I'm figuring out. It's been repeated over years. People are showing up.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, I know I can add value. I have a process. What is if I have this and this, I'm going to feel good about jumping. What are those things?
Path with instruction from somebody who has been where I am going. Okay. So I have a coach. I have a program that I've designed. The piece that's missing is a little bit of financial backing to be able to make the jump and not worry about the job money going away.
I wonder, and so this is just me connecting back in this story. There were a couple of things that jumped out to me. Number one is this checklist. Like, I put 3 stars on this checklist because I wonder, so one of the things we know is the things people are best at, they tend to take for granted the most. And I had to ask you 4 times about how the hell did you know this person was doing this? And after about the 3rd time, you finally rattled off this list, but that, I don't know if you noticed the other people watching were like, what the hell? Because you were like, it's this and it's this and it's this and it's this. And that is naturally ingrained in your head because you've done it a bunch of times. But what would change if that were written down?
I don't even know what list you're talking about, man. It's so natural.
So you had the checkoff list of what you were observing in the other person. Yeah, and I'll just toss this one out to the group. For those of you that are leaders, even not leaders, if you had a list of how to observe when somebody's in and out of alignment, or if you had a list of what to check off every day, raise your hand if that would be fairly valuable for you. Yeah, this is the part of listening to the story. It's like you share this piece and, I just have that and it's here. And all of us are like, why? My business brain is like, why are you selling that? Number one. But like that piece of, so I guess it makes me wonder, how much is that a part of the coaching you're doing?
It's wholly ingrained. I'm unable to separate it.
Yeah. I wonder, who do you think could get value from, if you just thought about approaching people with that list, how many people would you like?
Probably
I
every one
don't,
of them.
yeah. And so when you think about the financial part, I just wonder, there's three things that were in there. That list, the second part was like earning your right. Is that a book? Because it feels like a book, right? Anybody else pick up on the earning your right part? Anybody else listen to that and be like, and think about the 5 managers you've had that never earned their right to have shitty conversations with you? I know already I'm gonna have disclaimers on these podcasts because of my language.
That's exactly what I'm going through right now, because the guy that I
Mhm.
mentioned earlier on, that is the legacy in the business that we're building, he hasn't earned the right to me.
And
And he
how
hasn't
many
earned the right with
leaders,
half of the guys that I'm leading.
yeah, how many leaders out there do you think are operating, especially in the heavy industries like that, without that checkoff list and without knowing the importance or what it means to earn the right?
Too many.
Yeah.
More than half, I would guess.
Mhm. And how many would you need to sign up for you to be able to take this leap that you're talking about?
6 to 10.
Fair enough. So I'm going to stop there. We're going to debrief this. We're going to answer questions, because from this point forward, it would probably move into coaching, right?
Yeah.
And this is the point, because this is what I want to like discuss with you, but everyone else. How many times in that conversation were there opportunities that all of you had in your head of, oh, I want to tell him this, or I want to suggest you did this? I had to step on my foot on the
I know you did.
checklist, if I'm honest, because I was like, and I know some of you picked up on it, because I'm like, wait, is this written down? And he didn't answer. Is this written down? Because I was like, are you kidding me? That's a mini book that you send out to people. And again, listen to it. I'm going right into suggestions and opinions, but I want to outline that now we have this checkoff list, we have earned the right, and then we have empathy as it released in there. Like, all of that is the clarity in Jordan's story. And where does it put me and anybody else listening better or worse position to actually be able to help now? Better or worse position to actually be able to coach?
100% better.
Yeah, and I think that, just to reinforce the purpose of the podcast and what we're doing here, is that if we're not doing that purposefully, there were 4 or 5 avenues to jump off right into coaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, I do that crap all the time, and they didn't ask for help yet. So I just wanted to outline that, but then now we'll go and debrief it a little bit. Jordan, and again, I wanted to stop it there, and I want to stop these conversations at that jumping off point to help us redefine what we mean by clarity, right? Oftentimes I'll say, hey, do you want clarity in this? And we think, I need the answers. I need the step-by-step path forward. But for me, clarity is about like understanding, like, okay, I can create the path because I'm clear about where I've been. And it's in that I want to start the conversation, like your experience with the conversation we have. When you think about the past story, how much more clarity do you have now than maybe when we started talking? And if so, where?
The connection between simplifying the process I go through so that other people can understand that there's value in in a simple process.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me more about that. What's the value in
Well, it doesn't complicate the connection. It doesn't complicate it doesn't prevent shade. It doesn't step in between the care that one person feels for another. That's at the
that?
foundation of everybody's change.
What, like, how did you come to that just now?
because I have who knows how many pages written and notes taken that are not connection. They're me and a computer. The reason I do things is because I've obligated myself to other people.
Hmm. Yeah. Nice. Beneficial conversation or no? So I'll open it up for Jordan or anybody else with questions like what we did, why we did that. Right? If you think about this, you think about connection, just or the process of connection, the process of asking questions. It's just like any other process that we do. That there are some fundamental rules that you follow, if you will, to be able to get to the point. And as you're watching, like any other, like a call-in show would use psychological background to help somebody process like an emotion. Connection is trying to follow a very specific, if you will, pathway. And that pathway is simple. Do I know the story as the person asking? Can I see that other person's story clearly? Right? And that's different from trying to get Jordan to see it clearly. Right? Did you notice, anybody see that difference? There were a few times I could have jumped on oh, he doesn't see this, right? But the checkoff list was just as one of them was, I was getting annoyed because I couldn't see it. Like, I wanted to know what's on the damn list, quite honestly. Yeah. But with that, questions about where we went and why, or even questions for Jordan, if he's open to it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And Jordan, you're welcome to jump in with questions as well. Yeah. What we did, why, what was going on.
It's the forest for the trees thing for me. How do we, as coaches and leaders, ask them to clarify something they don't know how to clarify without, that's at the foundation of what we're talking about, is the patience to see a solution yet not present it. Let them come to the conclusion.
Yeah, and this is the piece, like as I mentioned at the end, the clarity that we're looking for initially is the story, the path. Where has this person been? The more I get clarity on that, the next chapter where they're going becomes easier and easier. If I know where I'm going, if I know I'm gonna drive over a mountain, then I'm probably going to look at cars based on that path. And we can do this in reverse. I don't know what the path is going to be, but I better understand what that car has, what motor it has, what four-wheel drive or not four-wheel drive, to be able to choose the path when I go, right? What we tend to do as humans, I've been through this path, so therefore I think that you are just the same kind of car as me. And you can go in the same path I did. You can go like you must. I run 100-milers. All of you love to run for 24 hours straight and vomit and hate yourself. Yeah, no, it sounds ridiculous when you actually look at the uniqueness of people. Now, there's some things that we all do, but what we tend to do, leaders, parents, friends, is we don't get the clarity of the story. And if we don't have the clarity in the story, where we're trying to give them directions to is only rooted in our story. And that could be, I've seen 100 people go through this, but that's still my story. I don't have clarity on your story. Probably one of the biggest things I see coaches do to their own detriment. More often than not, oh, I've seen this before, and that's when I want to stop, because now you have to work harder. I remember in juvenile corrections years ago, like you see patterns in kids and it's easy to pick up on those patterns. The danger in that is because I've seen this pattern before, then I know the person. Once I feel like that, once I think I know the pattern, so I know the person, my brain shuts off. I'm no longer curious. I'm no longer engaging. I'm just now sofa. I'm just telling them where to go, how to go. And that person is going to feel that. We've all felt that. We've all had that, like somebody giving us advice or direction. And in the back of our head, you don't know who the hell I am. There's not a teenager in the world that hasn't said that to their parents. Right? And what's happening is it's saying, and there's just driven into our DNA, is throughout human history, sitting down in a campfire for 4 hours or more a day, right? There's old anthropological evidence that hunters and gatherers only actually worked about 20 hours a week. I wish we could fast forward to that today. Side conversation, but the rest of the time, some majority of the rest of the time was spent in story in one form or another. And so when somebody's giving us direction without understanding story, we're biologically inclined to push back, because that we just have this unconscious response of what the hell you're talking about here, because that's our brain saying, oh, this person doesn't value me, therefore I'm at risk of being alone and isolated, and now I'm going to do all I can to tell you why you're wrong in the advice you're giving me. Again, another situation every one of us have been in, right? Where somebody asks you for advice and you give it, and then they start pushing back. No, I tried that before. No, that doesn't work. No, you don't know my situation. And if we pick up on that, you don't know my situation, that's where to start. I'm curious with y'all, what did y'all get out of Jordan's story? Yeah, go ahead. Angeli, did I pronounce that correct?
Thank you. Yeah. Jordan, thank you so much for being so vulnerable. And I haven't had the pleasure of speaking with you before, but I feel like I got a good sense of your character and your values in such a short amount of time. And the biggest insight I've had through the line of questioning and how we've gone about the clarity piece, maybe that's the metaphor that I keep sticking with. It feels like Jordan has this pane of glass in front of him, and we got a sense of how translucent or opaque it is. And we didn't necessarily break the glass, but we just found the edges. Like we were able to see what's up in front of him so that when it is time to do the coaching, like we're looking at the thing that's in front of him, not our worldview. And that's something that's going to stay with me when I think about how to connect with people, because it's not about what's in front of me, it's about what's in front of them. So it's just a really helpful insight that I hope will allow me to be helpful to others in the future. But thank you for displaying that so well.
Yeah, and I'm curious just to go into that a little bit more, Angeli, but like, where did you, like, it sounds like you had moments where, oh, I can see me applying this in my own, like, where did that show up for you?
Yeah, I think Jordan modeled that too, the fact that in service of others, how do I communicate so that I can help others? I think that was good priming for me to think about how I can do that for others as well. But when we're talking
And
about
in
connection,
what context do you do that? In your job or as a coach or what?
So I'm not a coach, but I am a newly minted entrepreneur. I just started an MBA. I'm trying to start a business, and my obsession is how do I help my future potential customers solve a problem that they haven't found a solution to yet. And I get so caught up in designing a product that I lose sight of what do they see the problem as being, because I could give them the perfect product or perfect solution, but if it's not the way they see their own problem, it's not helpful anymore. And for me, it's not about making $1 billion. My cheesy thing is it's about reaching 1 billion people. So I want to make sure that I'm focused on who the individual is that I'm serving, and keeping that at the forefront.
Yeah, I love that. And this is one of my favorite parts of when we're engaged in these questions, like Jordan was just a bit, we're telling this story. The process usually feels, I don't know even why you're asking, like anybody. And then what is just fascinating is like Jordan tells this story in construction and here. Now Angeli's over there applying just the learnings from the story in your MBA and entrepreneurship, right? Like in that process, I just call it simply as finding ourselves in somebody else's story. That's what we're designed to do, and that's the process, if you will, of connection. I wonder who else may have found themselves in Jordan's story a bit, like got something out of it, really connected with the piece, or maybe even as, oh, this one I'm going to go try when I leave. Kimberly, what do you got? Go ahead.
Just briefly add that Jordan, I felt a confidence in him because he had an intuition. I could feel the care for the individual, and irregardless if he has a list, I felt an intuitive confidence from his past experience. He's experienced from his past.
Where did you, Kimberly, I'm curious, where did that show up for you? Like, how did you connect that to your own life?
The way the way he talked about the people, he had the whole big picture. He interviewed him to get the job, but he knew that if he didn't do the thing, he had to keep track or the guy could possibly be fired. So he has the whole big picture. And I noticed that.
Nice. Yeah. We are about 5 minutes from the top of the hour. And I want to, first of all, thank Jordan. Everybody give a round of applause. Jordan, we didn't lose anybody. He's not bleeding. It's good. It wasn't a hot seat, sitting around the campfire, hopefully. And I want to end with just a couple of ideas on what y'all can do with this process, how you're going to apply it on your own. But the big thing I want to point out that will probably be pointed out in every one of these conversations is the path that Jordan and I just went down would be extremely hard for Jordan to go down on his own. Our brains aren't designed that way. If the same questions I just asked Jordan, if I had written them down and Jordan explored them on his own, he might not have gotten to the same spot. And that is not me patting myself on the back. This is whenever we engage in these types of questions with another interested human being. And that's, I want to highlight the interested part. None of us want to tell our story to somebody who's just trying to change us, just trying to fix the story, or is only doing it because they think that it's going to make us feel better. But when somebody is interested in our story, our brain explores it differently. The clarity comes from this necessity of providing value with the story. The attempt here isn't for me to help Jordan feel value. It's not me trying to help Jordan feel, right, connection. It's me trying to find the things that I'm interested, to find the clarity in that story that tells by default that his story has value. Because it does. Because that's what we're looking for. It's the parts of the story that help us understand our own story. So the only real trick in there is being a little selfish. Leaning into the things you're interested, knowing that because it's in their experience, you don't have to prove that they're interesting. You just have to find those things that you're interested in. And that's when you create clarity together. The more you have that, the more foundation that's built on, the more leadership, coaching, being a good friend becomes exponentially easier. The less you have to give suggestions, opinions, feedback, or advice, the more engaged the individuals will become. We heard it in Jordan's story. We heard it in some of your reflections, right? We felt it as it was coming along. So what we're going to do on here every week, similar process. I love nothing more than hearing different stories from different people, not knowing where we're going to go, right? And we did a whole lot of that today. I want to thank you all for showing up and for your interactions. I'll hang out with any questions. Find us on Finding Blueberries or Finding Good. If you haven't taken the connector type, go to findinggood.com, take the connector type. If you haven't jumped on Finding Blueberries, these questions are embedded in that app. We made some updates this week. You're going to be able to do packs and different things going forward. Always mention that at the end of the hour. Again, I've got just a couple of minutes to hang out. If anybody on the call wants to talk more, I'm going to stop the recording. I want to thank everybody that listened, either on the recording in virtual world, and certainly for all of you that showed up today. Tell your friends, we're going to be here next week, same bat time, same bat channel. That aged me. But at the end of the day, what we're doing is trying to bring back this very human thing, this very natural thing, this thing that is ingrained in all of us, and that thing is connection. Being interested in someone else's story, by knowing the questions to help clarify that story so that we all get value out of the story is what allows us to feel less alone, to feel more connected, and to be able to do and overcome anything together. Appreciate y'all being here. We'll see you next time.